Good afternoon, everyone, and a hearty welcome to St. Louis, chess capital of the United States, for the 2014 U.S. Chess Championships, Open and Women. We are in the Central West End, just across from the Hall of Fame, here at the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center for the start of round 3 of the 2014 U.S. Chess Championships. We're here at the club. As you can see, the players are beginning to take their seat. Timur GAREEV just walking in. I saw Gata Kamsky, the women's championship. And now, a hearty welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Chess Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, along with my friend and colleague, Ben Feingold. Ben, welcome aboard.
Hi, Yasser. It's great to be here. Unfortunate circumstances, but working with you here in the studio is going to be a lot of fun today.
I'm looking forward to it. As Ben was mentioning, we're missing Jennifer Shahade. Jennifer, I'm afraid to say, is suffering with allergies, and I have to play the role of host. And now let us go to see the current standings. Maurice, pardon me, I want to say today's round. AKOBIAN, Onishuk, Josh Friedel, Matt Molnar, Timur GAREEV, Daniel Naroditsky, Alejandro Ramirez versus Lenderman, Ray Robson, Kamsky, Sergey Ehrenberg, Sam Shankland. And in the women, we have Zhenya Krush, Abrahamia, Nemkova, Foyzer, Zatansky, Nye, Malakina, Eswaran, Baganskaita. And Maurice will tell us the current standings as well as the key matchups of the round today.
I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties here. Sorry about that, we weren't connected. Let me start again. Today we expect to see a bloodbath based on the current standings. If you could take a look right now, we see two young players at the top of the charts. We see Robson at 1.5 along with Alex Lenderman, both with 1.5 points, having won a game. A massive tie at 1 point with 8 players, and Ehrenberg and Friedel pulling up the rear at 0.5 point. Now on the women's side, we see Irina Krush, 5-time champion, doing her thing at 2 points, but more surprising is Foyzer, who is on the bottom half of the field, also with 2 points. Pulling up the rear is Zatonsky at 1.5, and she's definitely going to make a chase in this round. Now the key matchup, definitely on the men's side, we'll see Ray Robson, the young player here, St. Louis boy, going to school here in St. Louis. He's at 1.5, but there is the 4-time champion, Gata Kamsky, chasing him at 1 point. They should definitely be a lot of fight in this battle as Kamsky tries to surge into the lead. Now on the women's side, no question about it, it's going to be a battle between Foyzer at 2 points. She's still in the running for the Bobby Fischer Prize at $64,000 with a perfect score, but Anna Zatonsky, the 4-time champion, will have a lot to say about that because she wants to chase down her main rival, Irina Krush, who's standing at 2 points, playing today against Irina Zhenyuk. So there should be a lot of fight in today's round. For the women, it's a rest day tomorrow, so definitely expect them to fight, go all out, pull out all the stops. But on the men's side too, a lot of dissatisfied players with a lot of draws yesterday, a lot of people just standing at 1. So there we see Gata Kamsky getting his game face on, looking very much like the Terminator right now, and we should expect to see a lot of fight from him. Back to you, Yaz and Ben.
Well, Ben, I think of this competition as being one of the strongest U.S. championships of all time, a total all-grandmaster field. In that key matchup between Ray and Gata, Ray is one of those players who's just on the bubble trying to get on the Olympic team. So a result for Ray today would be very important in his ambitions of making the U.S. Olympic team.
Yeah, and Ray's a great team player. He's played in for the U.S. before in international competition, has done quite well, and he would be a great addition to the team. And I know with the white pieces especially, he's going to be going all out for the win. And I don't think he'll give the respect that some of the other players will give to Kamsky. I think at a young age and a little bit brash, and he's tied for first place. He's really going to try to win today, Yasser.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one of the things that Ray, even though he's our tournament leader with 1.5 points, I noticed that he still has that time trouble problem. He really misallocates his time. He wasn't punished yesterday by Sam, but he could have really gotten into deep trouble in that game.
We've had a lot of talks about this. I was actually Ray's coach at the 2011 World Junior Championship, and that was one of my main focuses, was keeping him out of his habitual time trouble, which a lot of people have. Walter Brown, for example, had it throughout the 70s and 80s. And now we have Ray ROBSON, and we actually talked about it yesterday. And I said, yeah, if you're in time trouble like that, all 11 games and have less than a minute, that's probably not going to bode well. So occasionally, you have to play relatively quickly. And here we see E4, as we expected.
King pawn
from Ray.
opening, yeah.
And we were sort of discussing before the broadcast if Gata would play solid with E5,
And he
which
has
he has done. And unusual, Ray's had 2 Petrovs this tournament. Are we going to see a third? I don't think Gata plays the Petrov. But 2 for 2 in Petrovs, I think more likely would be some kind of Ruy Lopez, where maybe Gata's going to play a sideline and get Ray out of his prep. As you said, one of his issues is that Ray likes to...
just bring it up on your
yeah,
board,
let's
if
have
you
a
will,
look at the game.
top. Yeah, and we'll bring that up on our screen in just a few seconds. But you were mentioning that Gata plays very solidly with black. But does that mean that he's trying to just make a draw, or he's just trying to get an even position?
Yeah, I think he likes to do it the slow and steady way. Equalize, slightly better a few moves later, clearly better. Sort of as you put it, as a builder. He likes to build his advantages. And he doesn't care if he wins in 2 hours or in 6 hours, as long as he has his kind of position and gets the kind of game that he likes.
All right. Now, let's see. Have we seen knight f3, by the way? Has that move been played on our screen?
Let's have a look.
Yeah. And we have a Ruy Lopez, bishop b5, one of the oldest openings in the world. And take us through, if you will, just a few of possibilities what type of defenses might Gata play? Could he play the Berlin, for example?
Right, I think he's trying to decide now whether to play the Berlin, which will start with knight f6, which we've seen Gata have both sides of, actually. And then, well, unfortunately for some of the spectators, they don't like to see queens traded right away. But a lot of players with the black pieces, they're trying to equalize. And, well, as of late, black's been doing quite well in the Berlin.
Extremely well, in fact.
And this is the main line that basically was started to become very popular after the Kramnik-Kasparov match, where Kasparov really couldn't break through the defenses. And we see this endgame, and this is very popular at the top level right now and for the last 10 years.
And it's called the Berlin Wall for a reason. In that 2000 match that you mentioned, Vladimir Kramnik, the challenger, kept repeatedly played the Berlin as black and managed to go through the match undefeated. And this was an important reason why he became the world champion in 2000.
Now, Gata also likes to play another variation with black. If we can go back, he likes to also play the Breyer or the Breyer defense, where black makes a very unusual retreat early with knight b8, and we've seen Gata do that also. And I think that Ray's pretty well prepared against that, and I don't remember Ray having a lot of experience against the Berlin, so maybe we'll see that. And that's the main line Ruy Lopez like this, where these moves are standard and have been played many times before. And in this position where black has many theoretical moves, knight a5, bishop e6, knight to d7, rook e8, h6.
Wow.
Knight b8 is the Breyer, where black wants to relocate his knight to d7, play bishop b7, and then his c-pawn has some squares to go to. And Gata's played this pretty successfully in the past also, so we might see that variation.
Oh, very nice. Well, it does look like Gata has made his choice of defense. But before we return to this game, let's go to the women's championship. And our leader, Sabine Feuser, is white against Anna Zatansky, 4-time U.S. champion. And this is going to be a key game, of course, for deciding the women's leaders.
Yeah, Anna, no surprise at all, being near the leaderboard. Sabina, a bit of a surprise, especially after her game yesterday, where she was playing Melakina. Melakina seemed to have a winning position.
That's absolutely.
And then things just went awry in time trouble, and Sabina now standing at 2-0, still in contention for the Bobby Fischer Prize.
Right.
And here being thrust upon the stage, white against Anna Zatonsky. And, well, Sabina, of course, wants to keep winning and keep pace with Irina Krush.
Absolutely. And Sabina's played our favorite, classical Nimzo-Indian Queen C2, and a quick D5 by Anna. In this position, castles is a normal move, but after D5, just take us through a couple of the lines that usually get played at this point.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways for white to play here. I usually play the very solid way, which is to take. And, okay, actually, black can recapture on D5 all three ways. The most common in my experience is E takes, and then bishop to G5. And I've had this position many times. More interesting for black is to actually take with the queen. And we've seen this a lot lately. And one of ideas is for black to trade queens by playing the move queen F5 and controlling the white squares in the center. And we've seen this a lot also. Another variation is to take with the knight, which is pretty rare. We don't see that very often.
No.
So c takes d5 is, I guess, the most common move and the most solid. Also interesting is to play a3 right away and force the win of the two bishops, which is very common. This happens very often in the Nimzo-Indian. White's getting the two bishops. And on the other hand, white's king site isn't so well developed. So it takes a while for white to castle, and black tries to attack and maybe play something aggressive like knight e4 and c5 and get an initiative while white is still on her heels trying to get her pieces developed. That's a bit more aggressive way of playing, which I haven't tried lately.
Very good. Well, let's go to Maurice, who would like to share a few tidbits as we start round 3.
Well, actually, more than just a tidbit, now that you're talking about Sabina Feuser, this 24-year-old from Baltimore, she won a scintillating game in round 1, which is why she's, well, at least half the reason why she's at 2-0 right now. And let's take a look. She had this position against Kamila Baginskaite, and she told us after the game that her dad showed her how to play this position. Imagine your dad, leading the charge for you, and now all these years later being able to play a game like this in the U.S. Women's Championship. In this position, she played this great move, F5. And she said in an isolated pawn structure, she was told to organize her pieces just like this. And this F5 break, her opponent didn't really understand what the reason was. And so she took on F5, and only to later see this devastating shot. Knight takes on F7, a brutal hit because you could not capture back. Well, you could if you wanted to, except here comes the queen crashing in. Queen takes on E7, and that would have been murder. Look at this pin. The knight is unable to capture on this square. The king would have to grovel. There's a couple of moves here, but King G8, looking like the most normal one, would be met by, boom, this vicious move, bishop to C7. Again, the knight cannot capture because of the pin. The queen cannot capture because queen takes queen would happen, and the knight, again, cannot capture back. You see the computer won't let me do it because of the pin. So this move here, knight takes F7, on this turn, knight takes F7 was a vicious shot, exploding the board, blowing up black's position. Black tried to fight back with rook E8, but was met by the very accurate queen to F3. And now after the knight took, bishop takes, king to F8, bishop took on B7, and suddenly this rook, or the other rook, would be trapped. If she had played the move rook to D8, rook A D8, she would have been hit by this move. And just look at black's pieces, all cut off over here. White's pieces dominating on the front line. The queen ready to take this pawn. Oh, too much, just devastating. Anyway, she went on to a vicious victory. That put her at 1-0. And then, of course, the miracle of miracles yesterday that she survived against Melakina and end up now at 2-0. We'll take a look at that ending a little bit later. You see her here very concentrated. She knows she's up against Anna Zatonsky, who looks super determined right now. Anna knows a win is needed in order to keep chasing Irina Krush, who is off to a blistering start, making it look easy right now at 2-0 as well. Back to you, Yaz and Ben.
I recall when Sabina was in studio and she was explaining that her father It taught her how to handle those isolated queen pawn positions. I reflected on the fact that in 1978, her father and I played in the World Junior Championship together, and I thought, oh my goodness, Sabine's, I'm old enough to be her father. She was leading the tournament.
No, I had a similar story when I was doing commentary over at Leicester's with Robert Hess.
Yes.
I mentioned I've played basically her whole family before. I played her dad again, this was in the late 80s, and we drew. I played her mother a couple of years ago in Vegas, and we also drew, and I've played Sabina once, and we've lost. So, boy, I don't want to play her sister because I don't want to be -2. Her sister's also a chess master, she told me. So that's,
Wow.
that's a real chess family.
That is a
Yeah.
chess family. And so we have seen this A3, what you said, going for the 2 bishops. And Anna jumped with her knight in the center with knight. That was the.
Oh, that was the analysis.
That was
Yeah,
the
she played
analysis.
Knight F3. That's
So
not a
she-
move that's very common.
No, an unusual move. And I'm told in the game between Alex Lenderman that we've had lots of moves in that game as Alejandro Ramirez with white against the current tournament leader, co-leader, Alex Lenderman as black. We'll just bring that game up on our screen.
Looks like it's one of Yasser's favorites.
Yes.
A French defense.
Yeah, yes. So take us through it, Ben, from the beginning, because the players have moved very fast. E4, E6, a French defense.
The French defense, and actually we saw several Frenches yesterday, and surprising to me, I mean, you're the French expert, but White played the advanced variation yesterday several
Yeah, that
times.
seemed very popular yesterday,
Yeah, I
wasn't it?
wasn't expecting that. No, with the move E5, which is, okay, obviously is a move. E5 very common, but in this game, knight to D2, the Tarrasch variation.
Tarrasch variation.
Yeah, and Ramirez also plays himself the French defense, so he's sort of playing against himself. In fact, he played it yesterday against Gadakomsky.
And got a very good
very
game.
comfortable position. Yeah.
Indeed.
C5, the older move. Yeah. Okay, C5, favorite of Victor Korchnoi from the 70s.
Right.
And I think Victor would always take with the pawn here.
Yes, he liked this isolated pawn position for
Right,
black.
and now I think they're taking with the queen.
Right.
It's sort of taken over as the main move.
Mm-hmm.
Knight to F3, White completes his development. C takes D4. I think bishop C4 is the main move. Okay, I
Indeed.
still know something about this position. They go to D6. Okay.
Indeed.
And now we're getting to the end of my knowledge, but I know you have to know about to move 20 to play this variation accurately.
Right. Castles.
Alejandro Castle. Okay, so White's a pawn behind, but I mean, look at the great leading development he has, and probably about 95% of the time they win their pawn back on D4. This is
Right.
a very common.
Knight F6 is the normal move.
Yeah, we're just going to go come and take it. Sometimes queens are traded. Yep.
Yeah.
And knight B3, knight C6, and the players are playing quickly because I'm sure this is in their pregame preparation.
Precisely. Main line.
Knight takes. And now I guess White has a choice whether to play queen takes or knight takes and steer the game in that kind of direction. I think typically White doesn't want to trade queens and wants to try to attack this black king on E8, which is not sure where he's going to go yet.
Exactly. Knight takes is the
And
common
knight takes
move.
is common. A6, preventing everything from going to B5.
Right.
A very key square in this position and in some Sicilians. In fact, it actually looks a little bit like a Sicilian.
Right.
Looks like that kind of variation. Rook E1, that's looking dangerous for black, and quite often White's getting some knight F5 trick in.
Some sacrifice.
Queen C7. Now the bishop on F8 has many places to go. Queen to E2, defending the bishop.
Right.
Bishop to C5.
Attacking the knight.
And this reminds me of a game I saw last year between Naroditsky and Shetty in the U.S. Junior Championship, which Naroditsky won quite nicely. And this may be the current position, but maybe they've made some moves since we
Okay.
Since we
let's just
started.
make sure we got an update.
Let's have a look and see
And,
if Alejandro has made a move. Okay, so one move each.
C3, H6. And we're in still a kind of a main line opening position. And let's go to Maurice for his thoughts.
Well, yes, you're talking about mainline opening positions, but I'm actually looking at some boards where it is absolutely not the main line. Check out a couple of these games. This one is between Victoria Ni, who's only standing at a half a point in the Women's Championship, against Alyssa Melekina, who is at 0 right now, having lost a very tough game yesterday. So Victoria decided to play something, well, I'll call it funky. Check this out. After knight f3, c5, very standard way to play. g3, knight c6, bishop to g2. The move g6, looking to fianchetto her bishop, right? Well, how often do you see this next move? b3. Well, I'm going to put my bishop on the diagonal. Who gets there first? Well, black did. And now in response, c3. I don't know about you guys. I don't see that happen too often on a chessboard. Very interesting and unusual way to handle the queen side here. Did she forget that the bishop was going there? I don't know. I doubt it. Right. So that's one board. Let's get to another board. This one less unorthodox, I'll call it. This is our leaderboard. Naturally, this line with Kamsky and Robson, that is Robson with the white pieces versus Kamsky, this one is a sideline, very much a sideline in the Berlin. Obviously, Robson didn't want to go into those main lines, so he went out of the main line and decided to play a bit of a sideline by allowing this move after knight f6. He castled. So here with the Berlin, he castled, and after knight takes e4, knight takes e4, played rook to e1, knight d6, knight takes e5, allowed this trade check, bishop e7, and now with his bishop under attack by this knight, drop back, and now we have the position in the game. So definitely not a main line. Players avoiding some theory there, that is with white. There was one other board that intrigued me, a position I've never seen before. This one, except if I'm playing blitz against somebody who doesn't know any better, maybe you guys have seen this line. This is with Tatev Abrahamian against Katerina Nemkova. On this board, they saw a Guaco piano after this position, c3, and the move d6. Actually, I know this move is played, but d4, e4, cd4, not just dropping back and saying, congratulations, you've won the center, white. And here, Tatev has been thinking for some time to deal with what's somewhat unusual in the open systems, to see these two pawns just being gifted to white. So we're seeing some offbeat lines, not modern main lines, at work here in this round 3 of the U.S. Championships and U.S. Women's. Back to you, Yaz and Ben.
Thank you, Maurice, for that. Well, I must say, I like to play the Yoko piano, and I don't think I ever got such a good position after 5 moves. And that c3 by Victoria, oh my goodness. Her trainer may be pulling her hair out. Her trainer being Yuri Shulman, Grandmaster Yuri Shulman, saying, "What have you done?"
B3 and C3, I haven't seen that before. That's one way to take your opponent out of theory.
Yeah, don't try this at home, folks. But you have a game for us, Ben.
Yeah, let's look at the game between the Irenas. Let's pull it up. Let's go back to the beginning. So, well, Irina Zenyuk and Irina Krush are good friends, and they've played each other many times, especially here in St. Louis at the U.S. Women's Championship. Well, Krush usually getting the better of Zenyuk, but Zenyuk has a few draws as well. And they sort of transposed into a queen pawn opening from knight f3. And we see this bishop b4, bishop g5. You've probably had both sides of this position.
Yes, so-called Rogozin system.
Yeah. And then there's a trade. And then Zenyuk played, well, I wouldn't want to call it unusual, but it sort of changes the character of the position. She plays queen a4 check, forcing knight c6.
Exactly.
And, well, why would you help black develop? Well, the main reason is you're stopping this pawn on c5 pawn on c7, I should say, from going to c5, opening up the center.
Right.
And you're trying to keep black sort of passive.
Right.
So this is a relatively common line also. And I would say of all the players in the women's, probably Zenyuk is the best prepared and does the most work and on her chess openings. So usually she's getting a good position, especially with white, the first 10 or 15 moves.
Although I do consider Irina Krush as a chess professional.
As the real professional,
And she's got her Grandmaster title, overall Grandmaster title, not just a women's Grandmaster title, but she's recognized as really top Grandmaster.
Yeah, and you know, when Krush is playing, it's hard to tell what the opening is going to be. Zenyuk is always playing d4, so we know what's going to happen. So I wouldn't have guessed this opening, but well, this seems like both sides are playing solidly. Zenyuk likes to have a slight advantage and increase it slowly, and I think Krush likes to do the same. So they get the kind of position they both like, and they're both playing pretty quickly. This isn't the b3, c3 that we're seeing in the other game. This is pretty standard mainline solid stuff. Bishop e2, and she takes the knight on c3.
We have a bio of Irina up on the screen. As you can see, her rating and her ranking in the United States. From Brooklyn, New York, 5-time women's champion, Irina Krush.
And I'm sure, like Walter Brown, she'd like to be the 6-time champion.
Absolutely.
And as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bishop to d7. And yeah, seems like black is pretty much equalized. Maybe Yasser would prefer white because of the pawn structure, but I don't know. It seems like black has done a good job in getting about an equal position. And now Zenyuk is thinking, is she worried about the discovered attack on her queen with the bishop on d7? Always good to put a bishop on the same diagonal as your opponent's queen, because good things can happen later.
For example, if white were to error here with the move castles, what would black do?
Ooh, now we have some sneaky moves. The sneakiest seems to be knight takes d4.
A discovered attack against the
Attacking
queen.
the queen on a4,
And if I take
attacking the bishop on e2.
And if I capture the bishop?
I think you'd better. Knight takes e2 check, and white is not very happy with the bad pawn structure and down a pawn.
Exactly. And let's go to Maurice to share with us some more thoughts. Maurice.
A big development in the game with one of our leaders. Alexander Lenderman on the black side has been forced to move his king, or did he intentionally move his king instead of castling? Take a look at what transpired here. We were looking at this position, and you guys were looking at this position, and when I saw the bishop land on c5 and the move c3 happen, I said, well, that's normal. But then I saw the move h6 happen, and I said, well, I guess. I tell my students never to play this move, That's like a little bit of a scaredy cat move. You're worried a bishop might show up on g5. Well, when you tell a rule to a student, usually immediately grandmasters break it and show that you're the idiot, right? Your students are like, yeah, right, what do you mean? Well, Alejandro Ramirez in this position decided to say, well, there is a reason why losing time in the opening might count, and he played the enormous knight to f5, or at least a super interesting knight to f5 due to that pin of the king on the open line. Again, of course, black could have castled in the previous position, but he played this move. Now, I'm sure this is still mainline theory that I don't know because I'm not a French player by any means, but after this move, knight to f5, the computer is saying this position is now just better for white, period. Not dramatically better, but at least a little bit better. Now, there's some different moves you could play here. The most natural is castles, but Lenderman might have been scared or at least prepared to deal with this move. Knight takes h6 immediately with check, pawn takes, and bishop takes on h6, and suddenly that king is extremely exposed. Your rook is under attack. Some casual move like rook to d8 might be met by something like queen f3, and the queen is kind of trying to sneak over on this side of the board. Very difficult to handle the exposure, the draftiness of this king right here. So instead of doing that, after knight f5, he had other moves as well. Maybe drop his bishop back is one suggestion, but he played the move king to f8, guys, leaving this rook buried for the moment. And we've seen this kind of unusual setups of pieces. We saw that actually in another French between Molnar and Akobian yesterday, where I said, oh, I don't like this discoordination. It's happened again. Those French players, they play some funky stuff. Back to you, Yaz and Ben.
Well, it's been a very unusual round, I must say, because of all of the games that we've been looking at so far. The remarkable thing is I've played all of those variations, and including this unhappy move, king f8, where you like to castle, but king f8, because of that sacrifice of knight takes h6, as Maurice was pointing out, that's why you play king f8. Let's turn to another game. We have GAREEV, one of the pre-tournament favorites, playing against the U.S. junior champion, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. There we see.
And they had a very interesting King's Indian, a little bit unusual.
A King's Indian.
Yeah.
Daniel Naroditsky has been defending the King's Indian through most of his career, so he's true to his convictions, shall we say.
He's playing fighting chess. He's not afraid of the higher rated players, shall we say, even with the black pieces.
And again, a system that I used to love to play as white, the Averbach system. Timur GAREEV playing bishop e2 and bishop g5.
And they played I would say, an unusual variation. Black played knight c6 early. Sometimes in the Averbach, black's playing c5 early, and attacking the white center, so we'll go back a move. And I guess the main point of the Averbach is it's quite difficult for black to play e5 because then he's pinning his own knight.
Right.
And a lot of times black likes to play e5 in the King's Indian.
Right.
So we see a lot of c5s. But knight c6, well, we're not going to see c5. And then d5, he hops right into the center.
Right.
So wow, this is a really egging your opponent on. I dare you to play f4 and try to crush me. And well, I guess f4 would be the most aggressive move, but Timur just played knight f3, simple development, get a small advantage with white and try to press. And boy, yesterday, Daniel was quite lucky. He had a really bad position
he
against
sure did.
Josh Friedel and
He sure
can count his lucky stars. Hasn't lost a game this tournament and probably feeling confident about that. Conversely, GAREEV should have won yesterday.
Right.
So what a reversal of fortunes for both players. Knight f3, not really trying to take advantage of black's play, just trying to get castle quickly and get a small advantage. Have you ever faced the move knight c6, Yasser?
No. In fact, knight c6 is really not black's best choice, in my opinion. Against Boris Gelfand essayed a very nice idea against me with the move c7, c6, and I had played queen d1, d2, and Boris went knight b8 to a6. And this was a very crafty idea, because what Boris was trying to do was keep the move e7, e5 in reserve, and at another, and what actually happened in the game was to play knight a6 to c7 to e6. It was really an extraordinary game, full of ideas. I have to say, I unfortunately blew that game, but I really enjoyed the battle of ideas. That game had a great deal of content. The move knight c6 seems to me that it gives white full command of the center, as Timur played very simply d5, knight e5, knight f3, trade of knights. And at the end of the game, if you look at that triangle of pawns, c4, d5, e4, that's a big space edge. And black has to be careful. Daniel has to be careful that he doesn't simply suffocate. And we see that with this move, knight f6 to d7, he's basically trying to find good squares for his pieces before white just does moves like castles, queen d2, and just takes over the board, the whole board.
Yeah, black has to be careful here he doesn't get sort of smushed.
Exactly.
White has a nice space advantage, and if you said, well, what are black's advantages to thwart this space advantage, I think we'd both be scratching our heads. Just sort of let white go forward and hope that white overextends.
Well, if you just look at also the pawn structure, you could say, well, black has a solid pawn structure, but give me a break. They're all on the, on the seventh rank. Let's join with Maurice to share more insights into this round 3 of the U.S. Championships.
Well, you talk about unusual setups for black. Well, here's another one. Tell me how you like this, which I will be having a lot of trouble explaining to my students, all right? We saw this position after h6. He said, didn't look like necessarily the best move in the world, kind of losing time, but has a point. It's the top bishop g5. So knight f5 happened, and then we saw, instead of castles, which leads to a sacrifice, we saw the move king f8, threatening the knight. All right, so the knight dropped back. No worries. So what's black supposed to do now? We think that maybe he developed one of his pieces, right? Wrong. Let's try h5. Go on the attack. You just played h6 to stop a bishop from going to g5, but now that the knight has come over here, let's get rid of the knight that just landed here and move this pawn yet again. So Lenderman playing some super unorthodox, very aggressive chess as a leader in this tournament, or at least a co-leader in this tournament, with the black pieces at that against last year's runner-up. He's looking for a victory now. There's no way black is just playing for a simple draw, playing this kind of chess. So super aggressive, super interesting, and you see Ramirez there scratching his neck a little bit saying, whoa, and Lenderman looking super cool despite having played such an unorthodox move. Back to you, Yazin Ben.
I must say that line is a bit confusing in a sense. You kind of bait your opponent to bring his knight forward. You lose a tempo, then you lose a tempo with your king, only so that you can move your h-pawn again. Very unusual, unorthodox play there. Ben, let's go to a game between Josh Friedel and Mac Molnar. I met Mac for the first time here, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Have you
I've known Mac actually for many years, and we've actually played several times. Actually, I was coaching the World Youth in Al Ain in the UAE earlier this year, end of December, and Mac was one of the American coaches.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, that was a very nice experience, and I've played Mac several times as well. Yeah, I've liked Mac for a long time, and he's one of America's newest grandmasters.
Right, recently got his title. His debut. This is his debut event.
Good debut so far.
Excellent.
Hasn't lost a game.
2 games, and in those games, not only was he combative, he had edges too.
Yeah.
Here he's playing black for the first time against Josh Friedel, and take us through the opening, Ben.
Okay, they played sort of a neo-Grunfeld, and yeah, when Josh is white, it's hard to tell what he'll do. I've played Josh several times, and sometimes he'll play e4, sometimes d4, sometimes knight f3.
Right.
So maybe for Molnar it was a bit difficult to prepare for the opening, not knowing what Josh would do. Well, Josh has had an up and down tournament, good positions, but not good results yet.
Right.
So he's hoping to equalize the score here with a win today. And they played this neo-Grunfeld, which I think is probably a favorite of Peter Svidler, but maybe not too many of the other top grandmasters. So it looks like a Grunfeld, except White's pawn is still on d2. What do you prefer with White in a Grunfeld? Do you want to have your pawn on d2, or do you want to play d4 as quickly as possible?
Well, it really depends upon my opponent. Normally, I like to play d4 as quickly as possible, except when I'm facing a real Grunfeld expert. Then I don't want to give them a position that they're comfortable in and analyze a lot. So here, I would probably play a move like queen a4 check or queen b3, and to avoid the main line theory.
Right. Okay, and queen b3 was played with the obvious threat of the knight on d5. The knight goes to b6 and d4. So I guess Josh decided time to play d4 now.
Right.
And this is looking more like a, I wouldn't say regular Grunfeld, because in the Grunfelds with d4, black's almost always taking on c3.
Exactly.
e4, bishop g4. Typical Grunfeld move, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. Black already has 2 attackers. Usually White's queen is on d1 defending the pawn. Now that the queen's moved away, we can try to attack it more with the typical move, bishop to g4, threatening to remove the defender, the knight on f3. White has to do something about that, and quickly.
Right, and quickly.
And he played bishop b5 check. Wow, this variation I'm not familiar with at all.
Wow.
So, and I can see by Josh's time, this must be his preparation. Very interesting move. I want to see what happens after c6, and I guess I will.
You're right.
c6.
Good guess.
And knight to g5.
Wow. Pieces flying all over the place here. So now the big threat is queen takes f7 check, not just winning a pawn, but picking up the bishop on g7. Black has to castle.
That's what I would do. I would castle. And I would be very confused here, actually, because it seems like bishop's attacked, the d4 pawn is attacked. But okay, obviously preparation with so much time on his clock.
Well, I recall bishop e2 was the game between David Navarra, a world-class grandmaster from the Czech Republic, versus Peter Svidler, who we've just mentioned as being a Grunfeld expert. And David's idea was that after the trade on e2, knight takes e2, the queen on b3 wants to cut across the board and play queen to h3.
That's not very nice.
And not very nice. And there's a hakimati threat on h7.
And this is actually the game continuation.
So they have reached this very theoretical duel that we've seen between Peter Svidler and David Navarra. And again, let's go to Maurice as he would like to share some thoughts on this round 3 of the U.S. Championships.
Well, yes, I have to tell you that I'm obsessed by this game right now. It's driving me nuts because it looks as though Ramirez has simply walked into Lindeman's preparation. And this is some deep preparation. Take a look at this. We have this position here, again, after c3, this unusual move h6. Not so unusual. We understand there's a small reason for it, but certainly doesn't look like it blows us away. So Ramirez said, what if I just play knight f5 and take advantage of this situation? King f8, that's starting to look a little bit more unusual. And then knight g3, and now this move h5, that looks super unusual. We've all done it, maybe in blitz, but in a serious over-the-board game in the U.S. Championship. But the reality is, White actually is almost worse already, according to Houdini. I'm trying to defend this position, and the computer keeps beating me up, all right? There's just very difficult for white to continue with any natural moves. For example, if you play a move like bishop to e3 here, then black simply trades and you have to take back with the pawn and wreck your pawn structure, because if you take with the queen, you simply lose a piece for no reason. That's not going to be healthy. Now, if you try a more aggressive stance after knight to e4, after h5, if you try bishop to g5, trying to take advantage of what just happened, well, black just simply ignores you and plays knight to g4, and suddenly there's some funky threats happening over here. Well, starters, I'm hitting your pawn on f2. That's not nice either. If the rook were to move over, then you have the move b5 with tempo, forcing this bishop back. Bishop b7. Look at those bishops just cutting down into the board. Threats like queen c6 start sneaking in the way, trying to get to that g2 mate. You can't push your f-pawn. And if you decide to bring your bishop back to defend against that, no defensive moves allowed, because thwonk, knight h2, and your position is blown up after king takes h4. This rook comes alive on the h-file. This pin is preventing the knight from moving, and you're getting creamed. Like, what happened here? How did black get all this? So another variation is the simple knight to e4, trying to trade off this knight. Black says, First, let's talk mate over here. Don't touch my bishop, because I'll mate you in two. Queen attacking down. And if you play this move, g3, this bishop will just drop back, and now you can't move anything over here. These annoying intruders are not going anywhere. A move like h3 runs into this nasty shot, bishop f2 check, when you cannot capture back with the knight because of queen takes g3 check, and it's all over. But the crying now, it's either going to be a mate on h2 if you go in the corner, or, well, it's a mate on h2 either way. You could just lose prettily if you like. Incredible what's happening here. Guys, explain this, please. This is not your traditional developing moves in chess. And you see Ramirez now staring at the board thinking, what happened? Guys?
Well, this is the problem, and as we know, grandmasters love their opening novelties. They work at home in their labs, trying to perfect and shock and surprise their opponents. And I think Maurice hit the nail on the head when he said that Alejandro seems to have walked in to Lenderman's beautiful preparation, and H5 is really a nice shot.
Exactly, and it's a bit surprising because Alejandro plays the French defense himself, so it's a real psychological tour de force there. You know, it's funny, in the game yesterday that Lenderman played against GAREEV, there was a position where we were arguing whether white would play g3 and bishop g2, as he did, or play knight g3 and get his bishop out to e2 or d3 the other way. And Ronan Harzvi, grandmaster in the audience, said, if knight g3, black's going to play h5, h4. And here we see it come again in reverse. Lenderman playing h5, h4, probably shocking Ramirez because black just played h6. You would expect him to play h5. But when there's a knight on g3,
it's
this
a
h5,
real magnet.
h4. And in fact, in some of your games, Yasser, where you're white in a King's Indian, I've seen in some of you're playing knight e2 to g3, you have to worry about h5, h4. Typical idea.
Absolutely. And take us to the game of our 13-year-old phenom in the Women's Championship.
And so far, she has all decisive games in her debut in the U.S. Women's Championship.
Yes.
And she's playing somebody who's played in many U.S. Women's Championships, Camilla Baginskaite. And they're playing a very sharp Sicilian.
Ashritha White, 1 win, 1 loss for the 13-year-old against, as you just said, a formidable veteran of Women's Championship chess, Camilla, on the black side of a Najdorf. That's not usual for Camilla, is it?
That's correct. And I tell my students when I'm playing somebody young like Eshwaran, I'm not playing a mainline Najdorf, dragon, 20 moves of theory, because I know I'm going to get beat. I try to make the game sort of calm. And here, we have the older player who probably has a lot of experience in the Sicilian, but not in the Najdorf.
Not in the Najdorf.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, special preparation, and she plays bishop e2, an old favorite of Anatoly Karpov, sort of a more solid positional way of playing.
One of the more quiet variations, as opposed to the razor-sharp bishop e3 and bishop g5 lines.
Yeah, nowadays they're just playing the English attack with bishop e3 and f3, and it used to be they would play bishop g5 and go for checkmate. But yeah, bishop e2, just nice, safe, and solid.
Right.
e5.
Right.
This is the regular Najdorf. This is why Miguel invented the Najdorf, to play the move e5. Bishop e7, and just short castle. So going for a very small edge. Rook e1. And the idea behind rook e1, white wants to protect the e4 pawn and then later play knight to d5.
All right.
And this pawn won't be hanging on e4.
Clever.
So probably that's going to happen, well, soon enough. Bishop to f3, really showing the intention to play knight to d5 with, well, great defense here of the white squares.
And reinforcing her control over the d5 square. B5, a typical counter-attacking move in the Sicilian.
And hopefully my students are watching, because I tell all of them, when black plays b5 in any position, you play a4.
Really?
So, yeah. Now this isn't my student, but maybe future student. Okay, maybe I'm the future student.
Fine.
Okay, and this really tickles black on the queen side. Black has to make a decision now to get an isolated a pawn or to play b4 and hopefully not lose that pawn later.
B4 is the,
Knight to
most
d5,
aggressive.
attacking the b4 pawn. And black can take either way on d5 or simply protect the b4 pawn. And this has to be still in the preparation, although, as we've seen in other games this tournament, Camilla tends to get in time trouble pretty early and doesn't necessarily play the opening the quickest way. And here, well, the young 13-year-old Phenom is playing very quickly, still in her preparation.
right,
Bishop takes,
pawn takes.
Yasser's happy with white. White has two bishops.
Excellent.
And yeah, this is typical Najdorf type position where it's not symmetrical at all, and it seems more likely a decisive result than some boring plotting game, and that's what we want to see.
All right, we'll keep our eye on not just this game, but all of our games here in the U.S. Championship and Women's Championship as well. We're going to go for a short commercial break, about 5 minutes, and stay tuned. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Everyone, and welcome back to our 2014 U.S. Chess Championships here in the capital of chess in America, St. Louis. We're at the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center. I'm the host, Yasser Seirawan, today, doing duty for Jennifer Shahade, who is suffering with a little allergies. I'm really hopeful she will come back and reclaim her rightful spot. So I'm here with Grandmaster Ben Feingold. Once again, Ben, thank you for coming into the breach.
Only 30 minutes with me, and you're still begging for Jennifer to come back already. I didn't think it would be so quick.
Yes, indeed. And you've got some action for us. In whose game do you have
two
for
of the
us?
top players in the Open tournament, Akobian and Onishuk. Well, yesterday I thought Onishuk was going to Onishuk it up, as I call it, and really squeeze his slight advantage.
Absolutely.
And you were surprised when his opponent sacrificed a piece that there was drawing chances. You thought it was over.
I did, and I was really stunned by you yesterday in the evening. We were here in the Central West End, just chit-chatting during a delightful spring evening, and you said you had put that game through your computer program, and that throughout the computer program said that Sergei Ehrenberg had defended brilliantly, and that it was always a draw, and that, in fact, Onishuk never had a chance of winning.
Right, as soon as the piece was sacrificed and it looked like he would just easily stop those A-pawns, it wasn't so simple.
Wow, shocking for me, but you've got a game between two of the pre-tournament favorites, I would say.
And Akobian always playing D4, so we can expect that. Onishuk very solid with black. How often does he lose in the U.S. Championship? It's hard to remember. It's like Gadakomsky. They lose once every 3 or 4 years.
One every 50 games or so?
Yeah.
So,
and we saw this in round 1. Onishuk was black. Okay, knight c3. Var likes to play the Nimzo Indian with...
As well.
And Onishuk thinks that's fine with him. And I've played both of these players, and I've had this position against both of them. So... although I don't remember what happened. The results were too good. Queen c2, this is what we play against the Nimzo Indian. And I've played Queen c2 against Var. And d6.
Not the
unusual.
Correct, yes.
And I must say I don't do very well against d6 for some reason. I seem to have bad results against that. Okay, of course, Onishuk likes to actually play mainline theory. I've seen many games here where he's castled kingside and still on move 20, 25, he's in his preparation.
Exactly.
So I think here he just wants to get Var out of his opening prep as early as possible and then try to outplay him in the middle game.
Right.
Var played a3, forcing bishop takes c3. White has the 2 bishops right away. What White's hoping for in an Nimzo Indian. Knight b to d7, and now White has to start getting developed because only the queen is out.
Right.
Knight f3.
I believe I actually
d6.
played bishop g5 against former world champion Tigran Petrosyan. And I had a very, very good game. It ended in a draw. But knight f3 is a very standard move, of course. You just want to get your kingside pieces out so you can tuck your king away. Knight f3.
And before attacking the center with something like c5 or castling early, he decides to improve the position of his bishop on c8 and plays b6 right away, trying to fianchetto his bishop and take control of this diagonal. And when I was a young man, I was told the key square in the Nimzo Indian is e4. Whoever controls e4 is pretty happy.
Yes.
So b6, and this is typical for black in this variation to fianchetto. And now g3 instead of the bishop g5, e3 setup. Which do you usually prefer when you're white in the Nimzo Indian? G3, bishop g2, or bishop g5 and e3?
I like the bishop g5 setups.
Yeah, I must say myself, I rarely play g3 in the Nimzo Indian.
I think it's too balanced when the bishops end up opposing one another on the long diagonal. It's very hard for either player to really get an imbalance that favors them.
Yeah, another idea that white has in a lot of Nimzo Indian, Queen's Indian hybrids is to play knight to d2 and try to build a big center with f3 and e4, and that's just not going to happen in the g3 variations.
No.
Bishop b7, bishop g2. And again, Var's one of those players, he's not going for the win out of the opening. He's going for a small advantage and then a larger advantage and outplay his opponent, and that's the way Onishuk likes to do it. So the players are pretty balanced as far as their approaches as well.
Exactly. All right, and then what happens? c5. Eventually, black has to take a stake out in the center, and c7, c5 is the most common.
And I like the way Alex is doing what he wants to do before castling. He's not just castling without thinking, and then I'll play chess later. He's trying to figure out the right plan, and then he'll castle when he's already done what he wants to do, attacking the center right away. This is a typical idea for black in the Nimzo Indian because white's playing queen c2, not defending his d-pawn, so c5 is a great way to attack. Castles and rook c8. Once again, not castling without thinking, but putting his rook on the same line as this queen. That's something that really scares me when I'm white in Nimzo Indian. I really don't like this weak c-pawn and my queen on c3 opposite their rook.
All right. Rook d1, very common move, and
d5, opening
again.
up this line against the queen here, trying to put pressure right away.
And I do believe we've seen the move bishop c1 to g5. I was just looking at the webcam. beautiful technology with these webcams. You get the chance to see the players' reactions, and bishop c1 to g5 has been Vorozhin Var's move. All right, hold your thoughts for a quick second as we will go to our colleague Maurice Ashley to share his insights on this round 3 of the U.S. Championships here from capital chess city, St. Louis.
Well, this round is about strange moves and strange positions. This is stuff that you don't see in the classical books. Probably have guys like Capablanca rolling in his grave thinking, what are they doing? But some really strange moves happening. We saw in this game between Friedel and Molnar that White played some unusual ideas. So Black said, well, it's my turn. Let me bring my knight over to a6. Again, knight on the rim, knight on the side. Where is it going? Who knows? But there goes that knight. And even the computer is saying, what? What's that about? So players are playing some deep, interesting, I'll call them interesting and unorthodox ideas. Of course, we see moves like that in openings of naturally. But let's go back to something that's more classic. Well, we did see this strange move here, c3 after b3 in the game between Ni and Melakina. Melakina said, look, I'll just take over the center. That's pretty classic. And after e4, knight ge7, castles, I want the center. That looks pretty good to me. White in this position played d3, and then castles happened. So Black playing very dominant classical chess, while White's pawns, you might see 2 of them on the second rank, but take a look at this, and now she's playing the move bishop to b2. What do you guys think? This looks highly unorthodox, to say the least. And of course, Black could simply play a move like d4 and make this bishop really wonder White's on that square. So some unusual moves being played here with lots of different opening ideas here in the championships. You might take a look at another game. How often do you see this position in a Ruy Lopez? Knight on e8, bishop out on g5. Not bad for Black, but again, Houdini likes White in this position, particularly after the move queen to f3, just bringing the queen out, quite simply taking that space advantage. Of course, the pawn structure is quite symmetrical with 4 on 4 and 3 and 3, but a little bit more space for White is going to be natural developing moves like bishop to d3 to follow. So very unusual chess this round, intriguing games, fascinating to watch and see how these players develop their plans, unorthodox plans, here at the U.S. Championship. Back to you guys.
I was going to say that Kamsky-Robson game reminded me of the Sinkfeld Cup where Hikaru Nakamura was playing world champion Magnus Carlsen, although Magnus was not the world champion at the time of that game, but Hikaru was trying to squeeze blood from stone in that game, and Magnus did make a draw. You're about to show us, Ben, the game between Irina Krush, 5-time U.S. champion, defending champion, playing Black against Enyuk. What do we have?
Looked, Irina Krush played bishop d7, and we were explaining all the possible bad things that could happen to White.
Right.
So White said, no, that's not going to happen.
I'll avoid the blunders.
So White sort of lost to tempo by playing queen a4 to c2, but on the other hand, forced Black to play knight c6. It's difficult for Black to play c5, but Black has other ideas. You don't have to play c5 in this position, and in some positions, Black even opens up the position with e5, which I think we're going to see later. D takes c4, and this is actually preparing to play e5. If we play e5 right away, then we're giving up our d5 pawn. This is a typical way for Black to play. And Black is getting another tempo because when White recaptures, White's not playing bishop f1 takes c4, but going to e2 on the way.
Right.
So White's lost a couple of tempi. White's king is still on e1,
right.
So time to open the center with e5. So very justified, the moves that she's playing.
Classical.
And finally, White castles. Black plays bishop g4, already with a threat. Black gets the first real threat of the game. Take on f3, bishop to d5. That's an unusual way to defend the knight.
Right.
I must admit, I haven't seen that in this variation before.
But also, the move bishop d5 does encourage the trade. e5 takes d4, otherwise bishop takes c6.
Right, we're going to remove the defender, and we're going to take on e5.
Precisely. So one good threat deserves another.
Takes with the e pawn.
Whoa.
I guess if we take with the c pawn, is there a knight b4 move? Was she afraid of that?
Whoa.
Because it seems more natural to take
Exactly.
the C pawn.
Capture towards the center is the golden rule
What's
of
happening over
strategy.
here?
I was thinking queen e4, Ben, after
queen
knight
e4.
b4. Knight b4 obviously is a fork of the bishop and the queen. So the queen comes out to e4 to defend the bishop on d5, but also to counterpunch the bishop on g4. But there is that
A little bit of everything.
unfortunate move, bishop f5.
Ooh.
Oh, no. Oh,
You hate
no.
when that happens?
I do. I lost a piece.
Yeah, how do we keep our queen on the bishop? Not easy.
Yeah. So your move, queen b3, was probably certainly better than my losing a piece.
And now what are we doing? What if we trade everything?
Right.
Who's better in this position? Or maybe nobody's better.
You could toss in c7, c6 as a tempo. You might want to win a tempo with. I don't know if c6 is a little bit better to have the pawn on c6 after queen e4. You could do what you were just about to do.
I'm mildly
which was
worried
trade.
about queen e5. That could be not the best tempo.
But in any case, I still think that white, slightly better structure, a little bit more advantage in space. But after e3 takes d4, what happened then? That's a very different and unexpected recapture to my eyes.
Bishop to f5.
All right.
Black's
attack.
giving up her idea of taking on f3. There's no reason now. And bishop to e4.
Now suddenly it looks like a Russian defense structure.
And some trades. Rook to e8.
I think arenas equalized actually after this move.
Both
rook
arenas
e8.
have equalized.
Both,
But especially,
pardon me.
but especially
Crush, but especially black has equalized. If there was an edge for white, it had to come before this e3 takes d4 move was played, because the idea there is you want to capture towards the center, and this move doesn't impress.
Yeah, and one of the strategies of the low-rated players when they're playing Crush is to have a position that's so boring and so equal that they're hoping Crush feels like, I have to win this game. This is a low-rated opponent. I have to score a lot of points and maybe do something a little crazy. But I haven't seen Crush do that. She's usually slow and methodical and builds her advantages. And if her opponent plays well enough to equalize and draw, then so be it. Then 6 wins in 3 draws, 7 wins in 2 draws, that's good enough. And, well, it seems like Zenyaka's just playing very solid and making sure that she doesn't get a position where she'll get into time trouble and make some kind of error. And it seems here like, well, she's done her job. She has a just totally equal position, and it's hard for either side to lose.
Quick question for you, Ben. If you were a betting man, and I know you're not, but if you were, what chances do you think Arena has of the Bobby Fischer prize of $64,000 by sweeping the field with a 9-0 score?
Are you asking me before the event or right now after
Right
the 2-0
now.
score?
Right now.
Before the event, I would have said less than 2%. And now
2%?
Less than 2%.
Wow.
And now I would say 5%.
Only?
5%.
Okay.
But I'm not a betting man.
Of course
so,
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you, Yasser?
I would have said 10% before the event
Wow.
and maybe 12.5% today. Interesting. Okay, so I think
I
that
wonder if Rex
Arena-
is shaking.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And what other games would you like to share with us? Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, let's go to Maurice. And Maurice, give us your thoughts, please.
Well, the game right now of the round has to be the game between Ramirez and Lenderman, and the variations get richer and richer. And now, as we analyze a bit further, it looks as though, in fact, white is just fine, maybe even better, maybe, which would be odd considering that Lenderman probably prepared this way of playing. But who knows, because it's so crazy. So the move that white has to play is so razor's edge that maybe he's terrified to play it because a bomb is waiting for him, but in fact he can survive all of it. Right now, the best and only move that the computer is giving is the move knight to e4, the only way to fight back. But here's where the terror comes in. Knight to g4 is possible. And now the move g3, stopping the mate in 2 idea that black had. Now what should black do? Well, there's a threat to get rid of his strong bishop, so he can drop that back in the game. And now for the move that most of us would just not want to play. That move is the move king to g2. How strange is that, considering that something nasty is going to happen on this diagonal? You just got off the pin on this one. Now, there are a couple of ideas here that white will be terrified of that would stop him from playing this move, would stop most humans from playing this move. First one is this, b5. Get rid of your bishop, wherever you want to put it, and now this bishop could go to b7. And look at that pressure along the long diagonal. Now, you might think, well, I can blunt that pressure with f3. Well, actually, you can blunt the pressure with f3. That's the main point here of black's defense. But black has to constantly be worried about and calculating this move. Knight takes h2, king takes h2, h4, and that rook is back in the game. Now, according to the computer, it's fine, don't worry. Bishop f4, I'm okay if you take. I just play simply king takes. I'm up a piece. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to put a rook on h1, and everything is fine. But we're human, folks, and we're looking at this with a few moves in. Imagine Ramirez having to decide right now that he's going to play chess in this kind of way. It's got to be running through his mind that Linderman has worked all of this out, and he is in trouble if he allows these kind of crazy variations to appear on the board, which is why he's investing so much time in this position, wondering what the heck is going to happen to me if I play natural moves and even the unnatural ones. Back to you guys.
Well, no question, this is absolutely a key game, and it is that fear of the unknown. When you know that you have fallen into your opponent's preparation, and you've got to ask yourself, just how deep has my opponent prepared, and this is a key critical moment, and how far does Alejandro have to analyze and somehow find an equality, I guess, something that's really safe. There's no safety in those variations that Maurice was sharing.
No, and Alejandro occasionally looks really uncomfortable because he knows that he's fallen into his opponent's prep. And
Exactly.
It's dangerous prep. It's not like black has equalized. It's what do I do so I'm safe?
Exactly. Well, we have been doing puzzles. Bobby Fischer, 50 years ago, swept the U.S. Championship field with an 11-0 score. And we've been taking some game positions from that epic success and challenging you, our viewers, to see if you can find the moves that Bobby Fischer used to win the championship. So we'll bring up a graphic just before we take a longer break, and the game will be after the break. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our coverage of the 2014 U.S. Chess Championships, Open as well as Women's. That puzzle was a little bit puzzling because what exactly had happened was it was white to move. White's Anthony Sadie sealed the move bishop f2 to e1, and that was the wrong sealed move. Had white played king d3 to e2, Bobby Fischer thought the game was going to be a draw. After bishop e1, Bobby went on to win the game, and as Tony Sadie explained it to me, that once the envelope was opened and the move was revealed, bishop e1, this losing move, Bobby's eyes just went wild. It was like, oh boy, now I know you're toast. And Bobby went on to win that game. And as we get set up after our break, let's dial in to Maurice. And Maurice, take it away. Tell us what we're missing.
Well, we're not missing anything but some super duper action going on Ramirez's board. Actually, what's amazing is how much time he spent to think, and he found Houdini's first few moves. That just shows the quality of play of the grandmaster in this position. The computer had noted that the only move that it saw that kept White's position together and maybe even give White a small edge was the move knight e4. And after much thought, Ramirez did play the move knight to e4. Instantly banged down was the move knight to g4 by Lindemann, and again g3, finding the only move to give a smidgen of an edge to White. Of course, we're still in Lindemann's preparation, so he dropped his bishop back to a7, and we are now in this position in the game, and Ramirez is back in thought, seeing that he's still following Lindemann's preparation and wondering what to do next. Now, the suggested move, king to g2, is the first move by Houdini. It also likes to move bishop to b3, trying to choose between these two moves, since this b5 pawn, this b7 pawn plans to land on b5, and a bishop will go on this diagonal. So here's the scenario, though, that you have to look at. Check out the clock times. These clock times give 35 minutes left. He's only played 17 moves as White. He's got 23 moves to go. He does have a 30-second increment. Every time he makes a move, he gets 30 seconds on his clock. But look at Lindemann. He started with 1 hour and 30 minutes. It says 1:27 and 20 minutes. He's used 2 minutes and 40 seconds. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Even if Ramirez is able to find each move to walk that razor-thin tightrope, he's going to be in time pressure at some point. And if it's only equality, he's going to have to be banging down moves to try to maintain that equality. Lindemann has left him to sit at the board to wonder if he's still walking into a giant mess where he will die in the most ignominious fashion, or is he just okay? But he can't figure that out without spending some time on the clock, and his time is ticking away. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Maurice. And I must say, the most intimidating thing in chess as a grandmaster is when you're playing another grandmaster and they're just banging out their moves as quickly as possible, and your time is leaking 10 minutes, 20 minutes each and every turn.
And he's trying to look cool, calm, and collected, but you know on the inside what he's feeling.
He's feeling like furious. Why did I walk into this guy's greatest shot?
Yeah.
Now, you've got a game set up for us. Which game would you like to look at, Sergey?
Sam Shankland obviously is another one of these Ray Robson types who wants to win the tournament to get on the Olympic team.
Absolutely.
And some people think he has a good chance to win.
And he's playing Sergey Ehrenberg.
Right, Ehrenberg's first U.S. championship. And, well, Sam played e5 against e4.
Wow. He's really opening up his defensive repertoire, because that's not a usual move from Sam.
No, Sam likes to play some sharp Sicilians. So they got another Ruy Lopez, which I think would favor Ehrenberg, his style of play, slow, methodical. And here we see another Berlin.
Berlin has become so popular.
Berlin declined.
D2, D3.
D3, yeah. This is, I think, well, in my opinion, White's best chance for an advantage. And, well, it's the move that I don't like to face when I play knight f3, because I think that it gets more Ruy Lopez type positions where the queens are still on the board. And I don't think Sam's going to be very familiar with these kind of lines. So I'm a bit surprised that Sam played this variation.
All right.
Bishop c5. And we've seen this a lot at the top level with really super grandmasters, the top 5, 10 players in the world.
And in the World Championship in Chennai, Magnus Carlsen versus Viswanathan Anand, we saw this line of play as well.
Castles, and rooks. Yeah, and this is going to be a slow, methodical game, which I think, well, in my opinion, favors Ehrenberg. I think Sam's a great theoretician, and he's great at getting an equal position with black by banging out 20, 30 moves of his preparation. But I think in this kind of a game, it's just a slow maneuvering game where preparation isn't really going to matter very much.
All right, and it's just who's more familiar with the resulting position. Bishop g5, nasty pin against the queen on d8 because the bishop stands outside on c5. Yeah, that's a little bit unpleasant. Bishop drops back, and now
Bishop
breaking
to
the
e7,
to break that pin.
And Sam, as usual, playing extremely quickly, probably still in his preparation.
All right.
d6. But again, this isn't, to me, this isn't Sam Schenklin chess. This kind of slow, blocked middle game is sort of, there's no wide open play.
Right.
And I think Sam likes it when it's more open and not a maneuvering type of game. And I think Sergey likes this kind of position more.
And you had mentioned to me, Ben, that Sergey Ehrenberg, he's playing in the U.S. Chess League, and he's been doing awful things. He's just been beating people left, right, and center.
Awful for his opponent, but good for his team.
Good for his team.
Sergey is just a tough guy in the U.S. Chess League, and I haven't, I don't really see him much. He's one of the few players in the event I haven't played because he just changed federations from Israel. And, oh, we can see his stats up here on the screen.
Our graphic, there he is. Young man, too, by the way, 31.
But, I mean, a tough player, and yesterday, great defense against Onishuk.
True.
So, I mean, wants to bounce back and get back into the middle of the field here.
Right.
Bishop d7, again, pretty passive play for black. Passive and solid, not trying for any advantage in the opening. Knight f1, typical Ruy Lopez maneuver, getting the knight to g3 or e3, and later to d5 or f5. Knight h7. So do you think Ehrenberg should trade bishops here? Or bishop back to g3? I think white wants to avoid trades normally and try to get an advantage.
Right. Bishop g3 to try to play knight e3 to d5. That would be my approach to the position.
Yeah, and let's see if we have an update on a move since we started looking at the game. And if he followed our advice.
He traded.
As usual, they don't follow our advice.
Played bishop takes e7, and after the recapture knight takes e7, simply drop back bishop c4.
Avoiding further trades.
And eyeballing the f7 pawn. Now in the 14th century, they would call this bishop on c4 the Italian bishop, because in those days they thought the f7 pawn was the most sensitive pawn in black's camp. So the Italians were anxious to attack the f7 pawn. And just a quick thought about the openings, by the way. Keep in mind that chess is a game that's 1,400 years old, and that enormous numbers of games have been recorded in our opening databases, and many of these games have names, and they can be very, very, very confusing, especially from transpositions. You think you're playing a queen pawn, and the next thing you know, you're playing a Caro Kann. But the openings all have names, and the defenses as well, and sometimes that can be very complex and confusing, especially when the names aren't familiar. Joe and Mary, but Nimzovich and Rubinstein.
Boy, for such a, I would not say boring, but sort of blocked, not very exciting position, Sam seems really unhappy. He had some faces like shaking his head and really pulling his hair back. He's pretty expressive considering he's one of the players in the tournament. Most of them got to keep it pretty close to the vest,
right.
but not Sam. You sort of know how he's doing and how he's feeling.
Absolutely. Gada is one of those stoic figures at the chessboard, perfect poker face. I don't want to play poker with Gada, whereas Sam, like you said, very expressive, as is Hikaru Nakamura. I'd like to play poker with those players. And on our, so are we up to date now? We have the same
Sam's
position?
having a big think after bishop c4.
Okay, let's go to one of our other games. I'm curious about the Gada-Kamsky-Ray Robson affair. That really is our match of the day. And we do see that Ray has got a nice center advantage in space. Is this serious? Can he really grind Gada down? This is more like Goddess position is black. It's
Yeah, and this is the kind of time situation I think we expected to, Ray having a big time disadvantage. But okay, it's not serious yet. Yesterday was a bit much, having 1 minute before move 20, basically. I don't know. I think actually from the last 4 or 5 moves, God has done pretty well to trade some pieces and get, as you said, the Gada type position.
Right.
Where he's not really worried about getting overwhelmed by his opponent.
Now I see in this position that there's the open E file, so it's natural that's what we would call the chopping block, as all the rooks would contest control of that E file. So if it's black to play, rook fe8 would be the normal move, I would suppose.
Right, I think that's why black just played bishop to d7. He's getting ready to trade all the rooks and, again, get the game closer to a draw. Even though God is the highest rated player, I think he's relatively happy to have an easy draw with black and then fight with white and try to get an advantage.
All right. So I would imagine queen c3, bringing the queen off the back rank, off the first rank, getting your queen into a more active position. You control the diagonal towards g7, and maybe there might be a reason why queen a5 might be irksome. So rook e8, chop it off, rook e8, queen e8, rook e1, queen f8.
Yeah,
Small
it's just
plus.
more pleasant to have white.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like what our friend Gena Sazanko would like to say, gentlemen prefer white.
It reminds me of the GAREEV game a little bit, with white having a little more space with the pawn on d5 and black being a little passive.
Speaking of which, let's move to that game, by the way, the game between Timur GAREEV versus Danya Naroditsky, our U.S. junior champion, in his second U.S. championship, going up against one of the pre-tournament favorites. I see that, again, we talk about this control of the center by white, and I'm impressed by the pawn structure
Yeah, I was
in
going
the
to say,
center.
I think Yasser wants to take off the mic and get back and play white's
Yeah,
position.
exactly, exactly. Hey, Coach, let me get in there. Okay, tell us what's going on in this position, Ben. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think I'm in your camp. I like white quite a bit. I like this bishop to d1 because it gets out of the way of the white rooks.
Yeah.
And yet, it keeps an eye on the queen side in case black tries to get counterplay over there.
Exactly.
And white has a space advantage, I think, as you would say, for free.
For free.
I'm not sure what the counterplay is. White potentially is going to advance in the center and maybe even attack on the king side. And he's really done a good job also defensively of stopping black from getting counterplay on the queen side. It seems like quite a nice position for white.
Right, and for all the reasons that you've just stated, if I were in Daniel's shoes here, I would not want to give white a free hand to play the type of moves that you've got on your graphic, f4, e5. I'm thinking that whether he likes it or not, Daniel may have to play the move b6, b5, offering his opponent an opportunity to win the two. Oops, e7 is that? No, it's okay. Shall we have a look at b6,
Yeah,
b5
actually,
for just a
it's
moment?
white's move here because
I'm
he just
sorry.
played queen e8, possibly with your idea.
Ah,
Yeah, the queen on e8 and the bishop on d7 controlling this diagonal.
all right.
So you want to play b5 and mix it up right away.
Trying. And what would you, I mean, you like white, I like white.
Yeah, I think Timur is not trying to figure out how to advance his position necessarily, but how to keep stopping black from advancing his position. Then when black's out of counterplay, then he can continue with his attack. So if he's looking at a move like f4, for example, to attack in the center, can we play b5 now, or is that just too dangerous?
No, that game is going to really sharpen up in a very, very short while. We'll try to figure it out ourselves. While we're doing that, let's go to Maurice, and Maurice is going to share with us his highlights at the moment.
Well, you know the game I'm going to go to, okay? Because it looks as though Ramirez has straight up blundered. Well, blunder may be too strong a word, but he's definitely worse. He did not find the moves. He walked into this preparation, and now he is definitely in trouble and in time pressure as well. As we remember this point, he played knight e4 and g3. That was fine. Lindemann dropped his bishop back. Now the correct move, according to the computer, the best choice, king to g2, a hard move to play, to walk into this b5 idea and let this bishop come along this diagonal. So he decided to do something else. He played the move bishop to f4, attacking the queen. Not the most precise move. Lindemann virtually instantly banged out the move e5, attacking the bishop. And now Because of this inaccuracy, white has to fix his problem and just drop his bishop back to e3 to compete against this bishop on a7. Instead, he just played a casual move, bishop to g5. He wanted to block this queen's diagonal going this way against these h2 ideas that he was terrified of because of the knight sacrifice on h2. We got you. The problem is he's now given black a free hand to play this monster initiative grabbing move, bishop to f5. The simple threat to take the knight that's guarding the pawn, queen will be dragged away, and f2 blows up on the spot with a rook dropping as well. Now, if you play the move rook to f1, the simple f6, testing your bishop. Where do you want to go? You don't want to go back here and hide. Well, this bishop looks completely ridiculous. g5 will be suggested in some positions, but even rook d8 is simple enough. But in fact, if you drop it back along this line, then suddenly rook d8 with a threat of knocking off this knight, dragging the queen away, that's defending the bishop. Black has simply grabbed the initiative by the horns, and if you do play this move, rook to d1 defending, simple chess, queen c6, what are you going to do with your knight? You look around, your knight has nowhere at all to go. You're about to drop a whole piece. What is he going to do to save himself if Linderman finds these moves? Let's see if we get back to the game. If Linderman is in his preparation still, well, Linderman has not moved as yet. Surprisingly so. Has he forgotten his own preparation? Did he know bishop g5 was coming? Actually, it doesn't even matter because bishop f5 is so natural. Most any of us would play it now. Give us Linderman's preparation. Chess gets pretty easy, right? I feel that black is absolutely in the driver's seat, white in a world of hurt. But it's up to Linderman now to solve the moves, to really put it to his opponent. And with 1.5, a win for him would give him clear first in the championships. Back to you guys.
You know, they say that chess is all skill, but you need a little luck from time to time. Linderman leading our tournament, one of the co-leaders with +1, 1.5 from 2. And it's so sweet when your opponent falls into your preparation. It's
the good player is always lucky.
The good players are always lucky. And there we see a graphic of Alex from New York City. Very young at 24, my goodness. And 25.82, I don't think he's at his record peak. At one moment, I thought he was over 2,600, actually.
That's correct, yeah. And Alex, great preparation today. And probably the reason he's thinking is Bishop, well, the last couple of moves by Ramirez, not the best. And probably he looked at them briefly, but was concentrating on the best moves. And yeah, this seems like not only a fantastic position for black, but the time situation is also going to favor him. The psychological advantage also. Ramirez really knows you walked into it. And you just hate feeling like that. Obviously, walking away from the board, pretending he's confident, but knowing that bad things could happen soon. This looks like quite a good chance for Linderman to take the lead. With the black pieces tied for first right now, you wouldn't think so. But when people walk into your preparation, that can work out really well. And that's why, well, just like we work really hard behind the scenes here in the studio, the players work just as hard, several hours of preparation for each game. And well, that's what goes into the game, the preparation. It makes chess look easy.
Yes, yes. It's not easy. It's hard work. And you have brought up a game from the Women's Championships for us to look at. It was a game between Arakemia and Nenkova.
Yeah, and we
that
got
was
to
that
this
Joko
position.
piano where we thought that...
I was shocked here that white played the move d5. So let's go back to the beginning when basically black ceded the center to white, surprising both of us, playing this line with d6 and taking on d4.
Right.
Very unusual. And now white went into just a tremendous think. I mean, maybe 30 minutes and played a move I would tell my students not to play, d5, blocking the bishop on c4.
Exactly.
The bishop having this beautiful diagonal, open diagonal, and now just blocking it up. And also another thing that's important to note is these pawns are just fantastic here, controlling all the central squares.
Right.
On d5, not quite as good giving up the dark squares.
Right.
So I don't know if we agree, because we have an arbiter if we don't agree. But yeah, it looks like d5 probably not the right idea.
Maurice is going to be our tiebreaker in case we have a conflict. Yeah, the move d5, I was attracted to these lines with bishop c4 when I was a youngster, and the reason was because I really liked these attacks that were based on knight g5. So if we were to go way back into our time machine, I would have probably started with knight g5 and after knight h6, then played bishop e3, and have been very happy to draw my opponent's knight to the pretty rotten looking square h6. And you're right, I would have tried my darndest to keep the classical center pawn duo on d4
I'm
and
guessing
e4.
that she was afraid of bishop g4 with this pressure on d4. I mean, h3 puts the stop to that. That's an interesting
Well,
move.
that's why I would start with knight g5,
Knight
though.
g5, also a good move. Yeah,
Right.
attacking f7 and getting rid of the bishop g4.
But she went d5, a counterintuitive move that reduces the efficacy of the bishop on c4. Knight drop back to e7.
And now h3.
Now h3. So it kind of seems to me that you could always play a move like d4, d5. If you were going to do it, start with h3. But okay, let's see how the game continues.
And the players develop their pieces and castles.
Very nice. Now here, I just want to point out that after the move d4, d5, two things happened. The first was that the bishop on c4 became less effective. The second thing that happened is the bishop on b6 became
that's
very
nice.
effective.
That's my favorite bishop when I'm black in the rear Lopez. I love when that bishop gets active.
So that's a real Italian bishop on
Yeah.
b6.
And in
'cause
these
that
types of
attacks the
positions,
f2
I'm
pawn.
always black because I always have my knights on f6 and g6 for some reason. And
Protecting your king.
Sometimes good things happen. Yeah.
The fine gold rule, always keep your king protected, right?
I like when my king is safe.
Yes, all right. And how did game proceed from here?
Knight to d4,
Not a bad move, centralizing the knight.
rook to e8, putting pressure on e4. Not really worried about the f7 pawn anymore now that the pawn's on d5 for white.
Precisely.
Rook to e1,
defending the pawn.
and bishop d7 just simply completing development.
Exactly.
Well, I would be very happy with this opening for black after playing sort of an unusual line. It seems like black's game is pretty reasonable.
Well, one of the things that white has to ask herself is what does she want to do with her queenside pieces? At the moment, the rook on a1 and the bishop on c1 are still sleeping, and it's not so easy to bring that bishop on c1 in the game. You got to keep the knight on d4 protected, so
Right,
d2
and with the knight
is
on g6, bishop g5 never really hits home because after h6, where do we go? Can't go to f4, we can't go to h4.
Exactly. So white, Karamia has some issues that she's going to have to solve. And what other games then have we got to take a look at? And as we make our choice, we're going to come right back to Maurice, and Maurice is probably going to tell us about Alejandro's position.
What a surprise, guys. How did you guess? Well, it turns out that in this game, black knew exactly what to do, and he has played the move virtually instantly. Well, he did take a few minutes to make sure, and he has played the move bishop to f5, and that is sitting on the board as we speak. A terrifying threat now of bishop takes on e4, followed by taking on f2, dragging away the defender. It is extremely hard to defend against this threat. White might have to donate something just because his position is in real dire straits now because of this trade here. And there are different moves he could play here. Rook f1 is one that I've been looking at, this move rook to f1. But that move, again, is met by f6. And the challenge to this bishop, where should it go? It's absolutely not clear. If you bring your bishop back to d2, that allows a strong move like queen to c6, and this knight is perfectly trapped. So bishop f5 was found by Lenderman, and really right now the position is terrible for white. Add to it the fact that he has only 22 minutes left on his clock. His opponent is ahead now by almost an hour. An hour in his preparation, and add by an hour, I don't see Ramirez surviving this one. I just can't imagine getting out of a noose like this, having walked into this preparation. Deep trouble for the runner-up from last year. And let's make this point, guys. You know how you feel when you're knocked out of a tournament this early, how devastating it is, a loss like this. You just feel like my championship is over after 3 rounds. And you could just see the look on his face, trying to find something to fight back in a position that is clearly much worse. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Maurice. And again, that situation really, really looks bad for the white player, Alejandro. I'm going to ask you a quick question, Maurice. The position looks so bad to me, in fact, I'm just wondering what the computer value evaluation of white's position is, and does the computer say it's a big percentage likelihood that Lenderman's going to win with black? So Maurice, a quick question, if you could let us know what the computer's evaluation is.
Indeed, yes. The computer is giving, according to its numeration, 0.88. 0.88, almost a pawn. So that's a big edge. A pawn, grandmaster level technique, the game's over. I'm just gonna have to milk you. Now, the computer, a pawn up, it's worse than game over. Just resign, just walk out the door, you can stop. So 0.88, it's saying, I'm getting there, give me a full point, you're gone. Now, that doesn't mean you might not be able to find some position where you're down a pawn, but maybe you can get to a drawish type game, a known draw position, but it doesn't look anywhere near one of those end games, like book drawn end games. This just looks bad. I think I analyzed one variation beginning with H3. This was one of its suggestions at one point, H3 in this position, and it gave a line beginning bishop takes, and then after pawn takes here, the move queen, the unusual queen to B6. Keeping pressure here and looking to open up the file. Look how nasty this is. You can't take this pawn because all of a sudden this rook sack and you're dead. I mean, you can't play queen takes rook because of this vicious mate. I mean, these are the variations that are cropping up. The computer is like licking its chops. Look at all these lines, bishops aiming at your king, rook ready to open the file. We saw that king move early in the game, and yet this rook has had such a deep presence in the position. Usually you castle to get the rook out, but the rook turned out to be an attacking piece in this position. So yes, the computer thinks that black is definitely in the driver's seat. It doesn't see anything. All the variations I've been working out, trying to defend with white, is just leading to completely lost endgames that are just depressing to have to play. And in time pressure 2, I can't imagine Ramirez getting out of this one. Guys?
Thank you, Maurice. I was going to say, a lot of times, Ben, you work with the computer engines a lot more than me, but a lot of times the evaluations I find surprising. Sometimes the 0-0-0, like the games of dead equality, when I prefer a player or two. I actually think that this position for white is really nasty, and only 0.88 in black's favor. Would you have guessed that?
No, I wouldn't have, but it's not very surprising sometimes that positions that look like there's no defense at all, the computer finds the only defense every move,
right,
and still minus 0.88, defending perfectly.
Wow.
That's not a good sign for Alejandro.
Exactly.
Because defending perfectly with the time situation and the obvious psychological disadvantage of, man, I'm watching this guy's preparation, and I'm white. You know, you lose with black, that happens sometimes, but losing with white without getting any play, that's no fun at all.
Right.
Especially so early in the tournament when he thought, I can repeat my second place or better performance from last year.
Exactly. I just wanted to point out a variation that Maurice was saying. If you play, rook F1 is a very human move.
Right.
H3 was the move that I wanted to point out, a nice line. After H3, bishop takes E4, as Maurice was showing.
Removing the defense of the F2 pawn?
Exactly. H takes G4, attacking the bishop on E4. And this nasty move, queen B6, right? Eyeballing the F2 pawn. And if we see the move bishop E3, hoping to push the queen away so you could win the bishop, that's that Zwischenzug move, H5 takes G4, absolutely devastating, changes the game completely because of the rook on H1 mate threat, and that's
And it's funny,
decisive.
when Lenderman played King F8 in the opening, we were sort of worried the rook on H8 would get trapped instead of be beautifully placed
Exactly.
where it wants to be on H8.
Exactly. So this is one of the variations that Alejandro wants no part of.
I've played Lenderman several times, and by looking at him, you really don't know how he's doing, but he looks really happy here. He was sitting at the board looking like, yes, this is my preparation. I'm pretty happy about things.
And now, everyone, we have a very special guest in our studio today. Rexingfield has been the visionary behind the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center, as well as the Hall of Fame Chess Hall of Fame Museum just across the street. He's not only been a terrific philanthropist for chess, but a great visionary. and he's in studio about to be interviewed by Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
Thanks, Yaz. It's my pleasure to welcome Rex to the show.
Thank you.
Rex, this tournament is something special. I mean, we come to St. Louis every year, and we really enjoy it. Has it lived up to your expectations so far this year?
Oh, except for one game in the first round, this one is really good. There's, as Grandmaster Maurice Ashley likes to say, there's a lot of blood on the floor in this one.
Indeed, this round has been quite exciting, and we won't talk too much about that first round game between numbers 1 and 2 in the tournament. What should we expect to see in St. Louis in the near future? Give me your biggest vision for chess here in St. Louis.
Well, my biggest vision is having a world championship match here.
Wow.
And the greatest vision of all, of course, would to see you play in it.
That would be quite a vision.
And I'm working to become a stand-up comic, too.
Yeah, indeed. We don't expect that to happen anytime soon. The tournament, we know some interesting initiatives that you're trying here. I believe you had some news on the political front. You know, you and I don't necessarily share the same political views, but some interesting things have been happening in the St. Louis area.
I know we don't share political views, and I'm always happy to enlighten you anytime you want to be enlightened. Yes, we did have some great news in the state of Missouri. It's been heralded nationwide, and that is Missouri finally passed its first tax cut in 100 years. The governor vetoed it, but the General Assembly overrode it, which is a heroic feat for any legislative body to override a veto in this country, given a 2/3 requirement, is a remarkable achievement.
Indeed.
But it did happen.
Indeed. What are your plans for the Singfield Cup? And they say it's going to happen. Who are you planning to invite?
It's going to happen, and you know, the bar was set by the Zurich tournament recently, when it was the strongest tournament ever held. So I said to Joy Bray, our overseer of the club here, and Jennifer Shahadi, my long-suffering teacher, you got to be long-suffering if you're going to teach me, you know, and virtuous. I said, we've got to try to beat Zurich. I want this to be the strongest tournament ever held any place, anytime. And we're going to try. It's not going to be easy, of course. We've got to get probably the top 6 out of the top 10.
Yeah, that would be incredible. So have you sent out invitations to, you got to have Carlson, you got to have Aronian, Kramnik, Anand, Topalov, those guys?
We have sent them out. I don't know exactly who has accepted, and I'm probably out of my element here. I do believe Carlson has already accepted. I don't know about the others.
Okay, we won't trust your word because your word is no good.
Don't trust my word. I'm very unreliable in that regard.
You are also running on Garry Kasparov's ticket in the elections.
That's true.
Kasparov is running for president of FIDE. What possessed you to want to become part of a chess political team?
I lost my mind. No, he called me up and he said, would you consider being on my ticket? And I said, I don't know what I would do, but okay, if you think it'll help you. He said it would definitely help us. I can't imagine why, but I said yes.
And I know you're a pretty strong-willed guy, but I haven't met too many tour de forces like Kasparov. How much do your opinions matter in those discussions?
Well, it mattered if I said yes or no, but otherwise, I'm not getting involved in the election. You know, that's really his. No one else should get involved. They should let him run that.
So what are the kind of changes does he plan to have that's different from what's there now?
Well, you know, he wants a unified rating system, and I think he wants to have multiple headquarters for FIDE. He has said, you know, back before World War II, everything great that happened in chess happened in the United States, and that's not true anymore. And I think he'd like to see the United States return to its preeminent status. I don't know all of his other ideas, but I can tell you this, in talking to him many times, he is a phenomenal visionary, and it's just wonderful for chess.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been that way since he was in his 20s.
That's right.
It's been tremendous. And now he's touring African countries.
He
it
is
looks
in
like
Africa.
his frequent flyer miles must be through the roof, the way he's traveling.
Oh, my goodness, yes. Fortunately, somebody provided him a private jet, so that helps.
Yeah, that indeed. Rex, thanks so much. I know that you have some weird opinions. Like, I won't talk about the Cardinals, how you torture me with the Cardinals, Yankees, but we always appreciate your being on the show.
Well, I always appreciate talking to you about the Cardinals and Yankees. Do you know, Maurice, that the Cardinals and Yankees have met 5 times in the World Series, and the Cardinals have won 3 of them and the Yankees only 2? Can you explain that?
Where have I heard that before? I wonder where. Guys, help me.
By
Rex
the way, have you noticed how ugly Jennifer's become today?
Oh, man. And her voice has deepened considerably as
Yes.
well.
Bam! Bam!
I do want to say this seriously. With you guys, with Ben, Yasser, yourself, and Jennifer, we have the greatest commentary team in the world, bar none. There's nobody close. I watch, as you do, all of these top tournaments in the world. And I listen to the commentators and I watch them and I say, we are orders of magnitude better than these people. And that's, my hat's off to all of you. You guys are off the charts good. You
Well,
really are.
We appreciate those kind words. I know I'll have to pay for it later with a Yankee story or two. Rex Singfield, always a great interview. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Back to you guys.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Rex. Nice little redeeming quality there. We are going to take a break because we are off the air as we have a technical problem. We'll come right back. Thank you. We do have a technical problem.
Hi, I'm Lindsay, part of the admissions team here at Paul Mitchell School St. Louis. Our campus is located on Maryland Plaza, right here in the gorgeous Center West End.
I chose Paul Mitchell School St. Louis